Hi guys, in this video we are going to discuss about STP election. So in STP election there are multiple things which are elected, but we are going to discuss only about root bridges in this video. So what is root bridge? Root bridge is basically a reference point for all the switches in the layer 2 network or in the spanning tree topology. Okay, and root bridge is elected on the basis of bridge ID. And the switch which will be having the least bridge ID will be elected as root bridge. But the question is, what is bridge ID? So bridge ID is basically combination of two things, bridge priority plus MAC address. You can even say switch priority. Like bridge here means switch. So switch priority plus MAC address. Your bridge priority is of 2 bytes in which the default priority is 32768, but yes, you guys, you can change the priority. Okay, but this is the default set on Cisco switches, and this priority is always a multiple of 4096. And the second thing is MAC address. MAC address is of 6 bytes, and the switch is going to consider its base Ethernet MAC address for the election. Okay, so next, see. So we have already discussed that root bridge is elected on the basis of bridge ID. So the switch which is having the least bridge ID will be elected as root bridge. So steps. So we are discussing the first step. First of all, all the switches in the spanning tree will share the BPDU for the first time. Okay, and in these BPDUs, all the switches will share their bridge ID. So the switch which will be having the least bridge priority, first of all the switches will compare the priority. Okay, so the switch which will be having the least priority will be elected as root bridge. But if there is a tie in the priority, then the next step is the switch will check the MAC addresses. So all the switches will check the MAC addresses, and the switch which will be having the least MAC addresses will be elected as root bridge. So let's consider an example. Okay, so in this example, what I have written here is bridge ID, and I have mentioned two things. The first thing is bridge priority, and the second thing is MAC address, the base MAC address of this switch. So once these switches come up in the network, they exchange the BPDUs. All the switches will exchange BPDU. This will share BPDU to this will share with this. So this is how the BPDUs will be exchanged between each and every switch. In this BPDU, all the switches will send the sender bridge ID. All the switches are going to share the bridge ID in the BPDU. So all the switches are aware of the bridge ID of the other switches. So what they will do? First of all, they are going to compare the priority. So priority of switch 2 is this, switch 1 is this, and switch 3 is this. So first, on the basis of priority, the priority is tie because all the switches are having the same priority. The next thing which now switch will look for is the MAC address. But so MAC address can never tie. Reason being, every switch is having their unique base Ethernet MAC address. So the switch 1 is having the MAC address, let's suppose 01, this is 02, and this is 0T3. So the switch with the least MAC address, will be elected as your root bridge. So switch 1 is the root bridge in this topology. Okay, and after the election of root bridge, only root bridge will send the BPDU. No other switch will send the BPDU. That means now after the election of root bridge, the switch 2 and switch 3 will stop sending the BPDU. Okay. Now see, we can also change the bridge priority. If you want to manipulate the election, you don't want switch 1 to be root bridge, you want switch 2 become the root bridge, then in that case you can change the priority. Like see, MAC address cannot be changed, it is unique and we cannot change it, but yes, priority we can change it. So this is the command to change the priority. You have to run this command into global mode, spanning tree VLAN 1 and then priority. So as I told you that priority needs to be multiple of 4096. Okay, so these all are the multiples which you can set as priority, and the default is 32768. So let's consider one more example to understand the election more. Okay, so this is the another example. Here I have changed the priorities. The default priorities are not set on switch 1 and switch 3. Switch 2 is still on the default priority. Now how the election will happen? So first of all the switches will share the BPDUs with each other, and the switch which will be having the least priority will be elected as a root bridge. So here the switch 2 priority is this, switch 1 priority is this, and switch 3 priority is this. So in this case the least priority is of switch 3. Now switches are not going to check the MAC address. MAC address is checked only if priority ties, but in this case the priority is not tying. Then in this case simply switch 3 will be elected as your root bridge. So this is how, if you want to manipulate the election, you can change the switch priority. So the switch which will be having the least priority will be elected as a root bridge. See, the MAC address of switch 3 is 03 and switch 1 is 01. But they are not going to compare the MAC address because the priority is different. MAC address will be compared only when priority is same. Okay. So I have already told you the command to change the priority. Thank you guys. I hope you like this video. In our later videos, we are going to discuss about the root bridge election. Root bridge we have already talked about. We are going to discuss about the root port election. Thank you so much guys.